Hey, welcome everyone. We're back to another episode of the Startup Voyage podcast. The future of work, embracing AI, remote hiring, and evolving recruitment. So today we're going to talk a little bit about AI. It's been in the news a lot, and a lot of people are going crazy around the impact to the world, people losing their jobs, making things easier. Everyone's really getting excited about it. So I wanted to pull together this episode with a special guest. His name is Lawrence Cohen, of the CEO of Rayon. Now, I brought him on board because his company has been in the space for some time. He didn't just jump on the bandwagon because Chat GPT came on board, but he's actually built a community in the AI space with a lot of expertise, and he helps companies with their innovations. So in this episode, we'll gather a lot of insights from his expertise and whether or not AI will actually impact the way the world thinks it will. So enjoy the show. Hi, Lawrence. How's it going today? How's your week been?
Good. Busy. We had our first live event about a month ago, and it's been a bit crazy since then, to be honest. But otherwise, yeah, good. Obviously, a lot going on in the world of AI and emerging tech, but it's a interesting time, as I'm sure you know.
It definitely is. I mean, I wanted to jump on a podcast with you because when we first met, we talked about how we need to embrace AI and how that's going to change just hiring, the future of work, remote hiring, evolving recruitment. A lot of things are changing in which how we are acquiring talent. And I guess I did want to talk to you in respect with, your perspectives on how you see the impact of AI on jobs and talents, and what do people need to prepare for. And you just said you had a really big live event and a lot of cool things happening in the space. If you had to just summarize it, what is there to look for in the next 6 months?
Sure. So, I think that we have to take quite an evaluative stance on it. I think AI is going to create a lot of problems, but I also think it will create a lot of opportunity. In terms of the jobs market specifically, I think it's fair to say that it's no secret now that the jobs market is going to be drastically changed forever, but by what we're seeing. And I'm not the first person to say that the jobs market will be eroded by this. In fact, when we started Rayon, it was with the belief that actually, when was it? It was about 2018, 2019, I think. So 2019 when I first went to IBM, and I've been working on Rayon, an early stage version of Rayon, for a couple of years by then. And it was with the belief that process-driven jobs would just be eliminated.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that new opportunities won't occur. I think that right now what we're seeing though is companies probably coming off the back of excessive hiring, right, for the last few years. And now it's kind of like, right, let's pull back on the hiring and let's take a more of a focused stance on how we can use artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies to become more efficient and more competitive, right? So, in terms of the future of hiring, companies need humans, but I think that they'll just be far more selective about where they invest and how they invest in humans.
Okay. Well, why don't you give the audience a little bit of back about Rayon, right? It was at different times. AI wasn't, out yet. So what was that vision that you guys had built in, and how are you then pivoting with, the rise of AI?
Yeah, so we're actually not pivoting. I think what's interesting is that, so with Rayon is an emerging tech community. And again, our objective is to create the world's best user experience for building a startup.
Right.
It's become harder than ever to build a company. And I think that with these new technologies, we're going to see, and erosion to the jobs market, we're going to see a lot more people build companies. And again, I think that with Rayon, our vision has always been to help facilitate people who want to build companies and just make it far simpler for them.
Right.
So I mean, in terms of that, I mean, when we first started, I was thinking about this because after we first spoke, I was thinking like, what was the first time when I thought actually AI is going to be a thing?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm probably going back as far back as like 2012, and maybe 2000, maybe a bit earlier, 2010, 2012 time. I remember reading an article from Google. It was someone at Google had written an article about how they were struggling to find the best developers. In the future, it would become harder and harder for companies to recruit talent, and it would become far more competitive. And I kind of think that back then I probably started thinking about Rayon and something that we could build. But it was really only, I think, when I was like running a company around like 2015, 2016, and we came across this piece of software. And at the time we had a girl that was doing something like very manual. She was doing something that was very like laborious. And I saw this software and I said to my colleague at the time, or business partner at the time, I said, this one piece of software at £80 a month completely makes her redundant. Right, and this is like 2015, 2016. So, I mean, as early as that, I was starting to, I think, sorry, not as early as that, but I'm saying that was when I first saw a piece of software. I thought actually just completely eradicates a person's job. I should say this, we didn't fire her, we didn't get rid of her, but again, I think you used the word before, like pivot. We had to essentially create a new role for her to make sure that and by the way, the technology, this is early, right? This is like 8 years ago, but it was doing a job far better than she could have done. And there's nothing against her. It was just, the software didn't make mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. Like you were saying, that this will provide new opportunities. Because quite honestly, if you look at the capabilities of a human being, we all are capable to do more if then we're pushed. And one of the things that can really hurt us is comfort, right? Just being comfortable, going in, doing the same job, and we don't really stretch ourselves. Even myself, as doing this podcast, me editing the videos myself, that's really not high value use of my time. Right. So when you look at how we're using people within an organization, you definitely want them to increase their capabilities to do a lot more and really maximize their brain power. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, everyone has their good days, everyone has their bad days, right? But I think that one thing that we've seen possibly with like Twitter, right, is that actually there's probably a lot of tech companies that have like inflated their employee headcount. I'm not going to get into the reasons, the whys, the what, ifs and hows, but it's definitely something whereby I see AI taking a lot of these jobs, and I think that actually I see that the humans having to move far more into social roles, right, where there's high levels of emotional intelligence, high levels of emotional quotient. And like, for example, I use the legal industry just as an example. I think there's a large part of a lawyer's role that can and will be replaced by AI. But for the foreseeable, at least, I think we're still going to see lawyers focusing far more on like client relationships, far more on negotiating, and I don't think that necessarily that it means we're going to have like less lawyers. Apologies. I don't think, we'll have less lawyers, but I think that there will be other opportunities, right? I think that lawyers might move far more into like a client relationship management role where they run teams. But I certainly think that with the erosion of the jobs market, so as unemployment goes up, and it will go up, more people will look to use new technologies, new creative ways as a source to create new incomes.
Right.
And that's where Ryan comes in.
Okay. Yeah, interesting enough, I was just talking to this guy. He's a lawyer in the tech field. So he's the chief legal officer in companies. And a comment that he made when it came to AI amongst his peers who are also lawyers, they used some AI engine and they were doing some search for, I guess, legal precedents in some other cases, and the information that came up was a little bit inaccurate. And so the thought immediately was, and it probably came from a very defensive place, like taking over their jobs, like, oh, these AI can't even get it right. This information is not right, and sometimes you need to read it, and the meaning of it is then needs to be interpreted. So AI can't do that; they can't replace us. And it was a very interesting comment to be made, because I think I hear a lot of people also questioning where their value will be in the future. And like you mentioned, I think people really need to wake up and look at AI as how it can improve their capabilities, and what avenues or opportunities will it allow them in the future, which I think is great, to be honest. So I guess because you're saying that it's going to take over a lot of jobs, to what extent, to what magnitude do you see it? Is it a lot of the process-driven ones, like you were saying, a lot of the social, like high EQ type jobs will then probably be developed? But yeah, I mean, what are you looking at? I mean, this is probably an impact across all industries.
Yeah, it's a new industrial revolution, except with the industrial revolution, you could put someone on a factory line, they could pull a lever, a lever, and and they had a job. I think that we have to remember that it's not just AI, but all new emerging technologies. This is not the industrial revolution in terms of its simplicity. Going back to the point you actually made about the lawyers, I think it's really important that we just distinguish, good AI companies from bad AI companies, because I think that, and your AI is only as good as your data, right?
Right, exactly.
And right now it's only as good as your people for now. I think that a lot of companies are very quick to jump on the bandwagon and say that we're they say we're an AI company. And I think the one thing I try to make sure I'm very specific about is whenever I've done like sales calls or board calls or whatever, I've always tried to just reiterate the fact that we are taking steps towards being a machine learning company. But right now we are not a machine learning company. We don't have data. We don't have good enough computers. And I think that that's really important to distinguish right now, and be honest with yourself. Because a lot of companies say, "Hey, we're an AI company, and we're going to see a new age of like this misallocation of capital that we've seen, forever, right?" And I think that the danger is that we now reallocate new capital into companies that claim that they're going to be AI companies and change the world. Because what will happen is they'll start again hiring, and then when everything falls apart, they'll fire their employees. I think in terms of like what does the jobs market look like in the future? Who knows? Because when are we going to get to artificial super intelligence, right? Well, we probably will soon. When you see what some like brilliant minds and leaders like Alex Karp are producing, you'd think that actually we're not that far away from it. I think that with regards to jobs for the future, I think that you have to focus on your social skills, right? Which is interesting, because when I give talks at the universities, the younger generation, they might be very technically gifted, but their social skills aren't great. And I think that jobs of the future for the average person will be far more about caring, right? Social interaction. Are you the teachers, social workers, counselors, therapists, doctors, right? And a lawyer's role will evolve, will be far more about like winning and retaining new business, right? But you're not going to get rid of humans completely. I mean, or at least I don't think that there's a scenario in the next 20 years where humans are just completely obsolete, right?
Right.
I also think that it's not in industry's best interest, and we can learn lessons from entrepreneurs such as like Henry Ford, who understood that actually it's all well and good creating and building these cars, but we need people to sell them to. And if people can't afford to buy them, then we've got no business.
Exactly. Well, I think to me, the way I see this past couple of years, it's like a double whammy, in a sense that we're now post-COVID, and COVID, really interesting enough, has really forced a lot of companies to rethink about how they're using their teams, right? So is it okay? Do I really need to travel to meet face to face? Personally, I know when I'm meeting face to face, the rapport that you can build, the trust, it's a little bit different, obviously, than Zoom calls, right? But everyone had to adjust, and it's fine. Like, people are okay not having.
Is it fine? Is it?
I mean, to a certain degree. So this is how I see it. So instead of me going to, let's say, a conference, and I'm meeting people, elevator pitch, trying to figure out, who I should spend my time on, I would rather do that on Zoom. And then once I identify who I want to connect with, then I would go in person. That's just me just trying to be efficient, right? But
that's not efficient.
Yeah. Well, how do you see it? So what's an efficient way? Yeah.
So first of all, there's two angles from this. So let's look at it from the business's perspective,
okay,
and then let's look at it from the individual's perspective, right? From the business's perspective, people right now do business with people. The reason why Amazon, right, is as successful and has crushed the retail market is because Jeff Bezos, whatever your thoughts are on Amazon, he understood something about the trajectory of the market and the human condition, right? Inevitably, I think what the pandemic proved is that people still want to go out. People want to be in social situations. And I don't believe that there's any comparison between, meeting people virtually and actually like meeting them in face-to-face in person. There's no comparison. And one thing that I would say is that I think a lot of companies, and this is because companies have been spoiled, right, in terms of raising money, raising capital. It's been very cheap for a very long time. They've neglected sales, right? So the reality is now everyone's like, oh, well, we'll just do all our sales versus Zoom. I believe companies, slow down their sales cycle, their sales process. I think it takes longer to close a deal when it's done over video chat, over video calls. And in addition to that, they're failing to seek opportunities. They're failing to realize opportunity that is in front of them. So you might do a conference call with 100 people, and you might say, hey, I met someone really, really cool. But actually, when it's in person, it's completely different, right? It's like this younger generation, they all like date online now. Right? No, but and they might meet someone and they go, oh, this person's amazing, and they show them whatever profile or app they use, and then they meet the person and bang, completely different feeling.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know what I mean? And I think businesses have got lazy.
Yeah.
Businesses have got, and they go, oh, we don't need, let's have everyone work from home.
Right.
I don't believe it works. I think it's inefficient. I think that companies have shot themselves in the foot. And from the individual's perspective, it's horrible. Living in London, getting the train to work is a disaster. It's horrible, right? I did it for a long time.
Yeah.
But when you're in an office with people, you're more focused, you're more creative,
Course. Yeah.
And I think that, sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, it just made me think that. So the point that I'm coming from, like I've been, working for over 20 years. I was with IBM when they allowed us to work from home for 3 to 4 days a week, and I prefer actually being in the office working with people. I mean, there's less distractions. And they actually removed that rule, and they went back to people having to go back to an office because productivity was not as high as they thought it would be, right?
Were you productive? Were you as productive working from home?
I was not. I admit it. I wasn't. I wasn't even motivated, right? And back then, maybe the tools were a little bit different. They didn't have a lot of communication tools that were as easy to use, but it doesn't really matter. For me, is the communication with a person just on video. I completely agree it's different, I guess. But where I was coming at is, do you think it's a generational thing? And where I was going at is that like dating apps, like you were saying, right? So people are trying to do like almost like speed dating. People who try to do sales, like in a way, kind of doing speed sales online, right? Trying to be efficient. Like I just said, I also try to be efficient. But then I don't know, is it a generational thing? Because after some time, the technology and the time people spend on their phones is creating this isolation where people are not that social. Or they're very limited circle of people that they all socialize with, and they're starting to lose touch with that human connection, in which it becomes now a conditioned thing that now they're not going to work. It's all remote, right?
I say so. Like, you know what I was saying. So I mean, in order to like just building on like the second part of what we were just like discussing,
Yeah.
right? It's the younger. I think it is. Sorry, I won't say the younger generation, but there's a generation of people that, you know. I think here they were advocates for like 4-day weeks.
Yeah.
A business has to make money, right? To not just survive, but to thrive.
Yeah.
A business has to maximize opportunities. And, you know, I think what came off the back of the video, working from home rather, was people saying, hey, you know, I can do my same job, not in 5 days, but in 4 days.
Yeah.
And my company is so cool and so woke, they're going to pay me exactly the same amount. Let's see how long that lasts, right? Because we've just seen it. We're seeing it. In fact, we're seeing it right now. Yeah. This is how understanding these bosses are. You know, we've seen it. We've seen the decimation of jobs in the tech sector, right, which is phenomenal for Rayon. You know, I've said from day one that, you know, Rayon will thrive, and this sounds awful, but Rayon will thrive during bad times. You know, we need a recession to allow us to really like gain market share, right? To push candidate acquisition costs down, user acquisition costs down. Yeah. And, you know, this philosophy of, you know, my boss is going to pay me the same amount, but I only have to work 3 days a week. It doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because the competition isn't working 3 days a week. Yeah. Right. The competition is working 6, 7, 6.5, 7 days a week. Yeah. And I think that there's a detachment from like reality, and I think that unfortunately what happened with the pandemic is people got a chance to, not unfortunately actually, I think fortunately people got a chance to really think about what's important to them. Yes. Which is great, right? We're like, actually, do I want to spend 2 hours a day on the underground? No. Do I want to work for someone that doesn't appreciate me, who will fire me at the drop of a hat? Absolutely not. Right. But at the same time, you know, especially in the West, you know, we want to have all the wonderful things that come along with capitalism. We want all the upsides of capitalism, but we don't want to experience the downside, because the downside of capitalism can be horrendous. So I think that, you know, what do I think? I think the future of work, I think companies will do what works best for them. I think what works for Rayon will be very different to what works for Google or Meta or Facebook or whoever, or you know, whoever, whichever tech company, you know.
Sure, yeah. So for myself, I've been in the crypto blockchain space for some time, and I always find it odd when I'm looking at these project pitch decks and they show the team and they're just showing, you know, like cartoon pictures.
Most of those scams. Well, let's. So you used to have once. So, you know, we used to have. Sorry, I'm stealing Jan's quote. We used to have Ponzi schemes. Yeah. Now we have startups, right? Yeah. And that's it. Like, the reality is that, you know, one thing that I like to do is, like, if I'm ever speaking with an investor, or by the way, we own the company 100% ourselves right now. We've never taken investment, but whenever I'm speaking with an investor, a prospective client, I will, you know, be like, Rayon is an emerging tech community. You know, the way we make money is we charge companies for access to the platform. That is the transaction. In the same way that if you're Apple, you know, we make money by selling iPhone. Or Tesla, we make money by selling cars. You know. Right. what's happened is that we've created this false sense of security where companies go, oh, do you know what, we'll work it out later how we make money.
Yeah.
Right, we'll get to that point. Right now, it's about growth, about market share. We're solving a problem for the world, which is all great and all very noble. But inevitably, we need to be able to create jobs for the future. We need to be able to create jobs to not just to maintain, but also like build on this phenomenal society that we have created, right? And companies now, the younger generation, I spoke to two people I spoke to this week. They're under 25 years old. Both of them just coincidentally raised 1.2 million each for their startups.
Wow.
So I asked them, how does your company make money? They're in the blockchain and they're in the Web3 space, right? A DeFi program, right? Like something along those lines. And how does it make money? And they gave me some long answer about who they're connected with and their contacts and I don't push it, but it's kind of like I want to know who I'm dealing with. I want to know who I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
And I think that capitalism is the ultimate measure of democracy, right? And I think that every time we spend money, we are essentially voting for that item. And I think that companies have forgotten that. They've forgotten that actually inevitably companies have to make money, and it's not an ugly thing. It's not saying be greedy and don't look after employees, but companies do need to make money.
Yeah.
And I think that we've just got lost somewhere with how easy it's been to raise capital over the last 20 years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I see that as well. I mean, I think if we talk about like the Web3 or crypto space, it's all been hype, right? All interconnected parts in the back end, making it look like there's a lot of activity. Investors are bought in, come in early, then to sell when something launches, and then make them money.
I wouldn't say it's all been hype, right? It kind of like
well, I'm not saying it's all. I'm just saying in general, that's what it's been about, right? Who can get the most break through the noise, right? And who can, and without many of these companies, they don't have a product. They haven't figured out how they're going to monetize. And I'm just saying that I can see that because a lot of these companies I've interviewed with and tried to help them out, and they don't have a clue how they're going to make money, or they've made a very little money based on the current relationships they may have, but they're not real deals. They're not really fulfilling any real demand. So that I'm just saying that I can see that. I mean, that is an important question to be able to answer if you're going to take in capital. And surprisingly, they got the capital without even knowing how they're going to make that money.
I think the blockchain and I think the Web3 space, should we say, time will tell. I think that there's definitely some interesting projects out there, and I think that you also have to be willing to invest and make money in the future, to make money in the future, and you don't have to make money. Every company is going to be profitable after like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. But there has to be a clear vision. There has to be a strategy as to how you're going to monetize. I think that like FTX, like great example. We were speaking with FTX about 2 weeks before they collapsed.
Okay.
And they were like very open about what they were doing, and they were just like, we've got $900 million that we need to like invest on like online sponsorships, and they were just like, we were talking to them about have like a partnership, and just, unfortunately, or fortunately, it obviously didn't go anywhere positive, but it just shows what happens when people can just like bullshit their way to money, and if they're close to the money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
I think that with things like Bitcoin, with things like Ethereum, again, the jury's still out, but I can understand like the attraction. But that said, I don't own any crypto or anything like that myself.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right.
Uh,
Oh,
and
okay.
I
So,
think actually, one thing, I think that most of the Web3 founders
yeah.
are just they're marketing people. They're just blaggers, right?
Yeah.
Like
Well,
kind of like the in the early 90s.
yeah. Well, I was searching a lot of guests, so I think the makeup of the audience or even the guest speakers I'm going after, they're either proven themselves in Web 2 or they're new to Web 3 or have some traction in Web 3. But what I recognize is the Web 3 guys have a lot to learn from Web 2 and building a business, a real business with revenue and stuff like that. And the Web
Yeah,
2,
I'm not even talking about like profitability, right? When I say that, I wasn't talking about I'm just talking about like thinking about a real strategy, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess well, let's talk about what do you think the opportunities are for upskilling or reskilling? I mean, they're still going to need humans. So we talked about having a high IQ, these social jobs. Um, like what other areas? Uh,
Well, I think a real understanding of like machine learning,
hmm,
you know. Um, I think right now, if I was going to start a business from scratch and it was something whereby it would be like, right, money was the focus. I always say, like, with a business, like, you have to just be very passionate about it.
hmm,
There's a lot of things that Jan and I could have done that would have been far easier than building Rayon, that would have made a lot of money very quickly.
right.
And maybe we should have done it, by the way. Maybe we should have like just jumped in and made money very quickly and then done Rayon, which is
Yeah.
far more of a passion. But I think that cybersecurity is certainly an area where I think, not just, by the way, from a machine learning or an engineering perspective, but also from like a business and sales perspective.
Right.
Um, you know, I think we're going to be flooded with cybersecurity companies, and we will, over this decade, separate the wheat from the chaff. And I think that there's going to be a lot of areas in that perspective. Sales, I think people are going to want to deal with sales, right? I think financial services, I think there will become, I think machine learning will create new ways to source opportunities. I think it might even do like, the earlier part of the sales process in terms of lead generation and marketing. So again, there's going to be humans behind that. And it'll be the people that understand A, humans, and B, machine learning. So I think having a good understanding also of like the sciences, right? We're seeing a lot of money and a lot of like some of the best minds going into genomics, biomanufacturing, different and relevant areas of like AI and medtech. And I think that as much as we're going to see a depletion of many jobs, we also have an opportunity to grasp at millions and millions and millions of new jobs.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. So I just see I see that I think we'll have a lot of like new startups the rest, overcoming over this decade. I'm not. Yeah. I mean, are you quite pessimistic about the future of I guess like industry and capitalism? Like, do you think that?
No, I think I don't know. I guess it depends. I always have to look at it from the perspective of my social status and try to looking at it up and down the spectrum. But the way I see it, there's you can call it the new generation coming in. A lot of these parents work really hard, amass some financial wealth. People get to go to college. They're given more opportunities and freedom to more or less do whatever they want. I've seen a lot of kids get lazy, to be honest, and they don't do much with their lives, right? I've met a lot of influencer people recently, and they've got some glorious pictures. I don't know whose money they're spending. I don't think they make that much, but they're living pretty well off. So then it kind of poses, okay, well, a lot of these guys, not a lot, because there's a segment that will go in and start their own businesses. That's great. What they look like, maybe they're very human centric, like service industries or whatnot. I'm not pessimistic at all. I think that for sure there's going to be more opportunity. It's just who's willing to grab it. And I think the competition has become it'll become very fierce, to be honest. And if you're not,
Yeah,
if you're not, if you're not out there hunting, right, you're at some point, if you can't conserve what you have, you're going to starve. That's how I see it.
you've got to have, and I think that's the one thing that's like lacking is that we've become so. Sorry, a large part of the world has become so wealthy. Like it's rare to find people with that like killer instinct, that like aggression that it takes. And I think that we're going to see a widening of the wealth gap in a way that we've seen before. But in addition to that, I think, and this is something that no one really talks about, I've possibly like made it up in my head. I don't know if it makes sense, so you can call me out on it if it's nonsense. But like the time gap, and what I mean by that is that in the West, like, you know, not just in the West, now many societies live far richer than they did 50, 100, 150, 200 years ago, right? We live far longer than we were, you know, 150, 200 years ago. And a large part of that is because of like technology. Well, it is almost all because of like advancements in technology. But I think that in order to, and I think you used the right word, like to like maintain your lifestyle, you're going to have to work longer and harder in areas that technology can't compete. So yeah, I think that socially it's very destructive in terms of, you know, people like, you know, just, you know, right, it's all well and good having a house and central heating and, you know, indoor plumbing, but actually if you're working every second that God gives just to maintain it, I think that you're heading for disaster, right? So yeah, I mean, I think the solution there, I mean, if there is a solution, is, you know, is to find a way to just create prosperity for the individual, to ensure that actually as not just AI, but as technologies advance, right? Because we're going to see new industries in space. We're already seeing new industries in defense, you know. There has to be a way to ensure that we protect prosperity for the individual. And if we don't, you know, governments can only tax their people to the point of revolt. So, you know, so yeah.
Well, it's interesting you're saying that, you know, the new generation is, you know, spending more freely than the previous generations. I look at when I was growing up, I never felt that I didn't have enough. I have 4 older brothers. My parents were always with the mindset is, I don't care if it costs 25 cents. If you don't need it, don't buy it, right? These days, you can just say, oh yeah, I'll buy a pack of gum, right? You don't really need it. You know, it's like, it's just that to be able to just toss that out. I'm going to buy a can of Red Bull, right? It costs me $1.50. I'm like, I mean, compared to my parents said, no, you're not buying it. When I was young, I said, no, we're not spending money. That's garbage. That you're not putting that in your system. Yeah, and it's just a huge difference, right?
What, in terms of like mentality?
Yes.
Sure, but you know, I think, you know, again, I'm stealing Jan's line, but the truth is somewhere in the middle. In terms, you know, like there's other things that, you know, like the younger generation spend a lot more money on traveling. Right. You know, personally, just my opinion, I think actually when people are not young, actually, actually in general, actually, I think traveling is very good for people, you know. I think that where the detachment comes from is that, you know, if people don't want to work, but they still want to be able to buy their like £50 or whatever, like $70 flights, you know, there's a reality check that's coming. And I think that the risk is that if AI does advance as far as I think it can, you will just see a widening of the wealth gap to like something that we've never ever experienced before, because we've never had that level of wealth before, right? The world's certainly seen, you know, the depths of despair and the worst types of poverty, but we've never experienced wealth in the way that we have the last 20, 30, 40 years, maybe 60 years at a push, So it's going to force us to make just some we're going to have to just be very careful with some of the decisions that we make, for society. And I think it's fair to say the world is not in a good place at the moment. So, it's we have to just really think about the impact that our actions will have.
Okay, well, I mean, what do you think about then when it comes to AI? What are some of the ethical considerations and, keeping a balance on, the human-centered work and design that's still, not detaching us from technology, from people, right? So what do you think are some of those considerations?
Are you talking about in terms of ethics, in terms of the fact that we could build tools that will just destroy humanity?
Yeah, well, that's one angle for sure, right? That's one of the dangers that the governments are afraid of, right?
Right. I think that whichever nation wins the AI race is going to potentially rule the world. I think that the nations of the future, and I could be wrong. I just I go back and forth on this. I think that the strongest societies in the future will have very, very advanced AI, but also small populations. I'm not talking about minuscule populations, but I'm talking about relative to what a lot of countries have. And I think that society as a whole is suffering from a fall in populations, right? I think, and again, I kind of take a balanced view on this, in the fact that I think in richer countries, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think richer countries, we're going to see birth rates deplete, and as people get richer, the birth rates will deplete. I think in poorer nations, the birth rates will rise and rise and rise. But I think that in terms of the countries, I think that in fact, it doesn't even necessarily now. If we experience artificial superintelligence, I mean, I'm not one of these people that sees the world as it's coming to an end, right? I think there's probably no. Do you know? Look, we see it a lot now, with climate activists, and,
of course, yeah.
I think there probably is enough resources, and I think Jan and I have always taken the view that with people that are producing goods and services will have to become very competitive on price. But I think that if you do have a smaller population as a country, I think it probably will prove to be an advantage. Right? I think that you'll be able to have a more sustainable jobs market. Okay. You'll be able to have a richer, or just better quality housing and whatever.
Sure.
Well, actually, sorry, I shouldn't have said that, because I think technology. One thing I think technology will do, and there's some brilliant companies that came across one. Although I haven't actually looked at them recently, but I think they were called Boxable, and they were just building very cheap module houses. So I don't think people will need to necessarily commit to a £500,000 or £1 million mortgage that they pay over 35 years in order to have a place to live. And I think society will become more responsible and hopefully wise up to that. But yeah, I think that. What do I think? I think that we don't know how good AI is going to get, and I think that there's multiple threats that it could create. That's it. I think it can be what's the word? Replicating people, right, through artificial general intelligence. And, but I think also you could probably build weapons that just kind of switch off every computer in the world.
That's right.
Or sorry, maybe the AI. Maybe we can't. Maybe the AIs can.
Well, that's going back to Terminator, right? That's the Terminator story.
Well, yeah, exactly. No, I'm not comparing us to Skynet yet. But how do we know?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, what one ideal situation that I hope that could happen, and this is because I am naturally an optimistic person, is the fact that if we can, through every different industrial revolution, people are then pushed forward and then they reskill themselves, or new talent is born, or are refocused on something. It would be pretty cool to have more people then focused on science, right? Or something. And you think about, we've got other problems we got to solve in this world, right? We've got global warming. I hear some people say that's not a true thing, that's not real, and we see evidence that it is real. Um, Someone solving capturing CO2 from the air and converting that into concrete. I mean, these type of things, and medical, right? So there's a lot of things that can still be used to almost like shift humans into something else that could be more beneficial for total humanity rather than pure capitalism. Not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that maybe that's the way it goes. Maybe it's maybe
with
this.
with global warming, I think, and we discuss this a lot at work, and I think that there's very few people who are from the people I speak with, there's very few people, if any, that deny global warming or climate change is happening. I think the argument is, what is the extent to which it is man-made? How, and I'm not saying it's not. I'm simply saying with things like that, I don't know. And I think what's interesting is that, in the way that I'm saying, I don't know what will happen with, I don't know the extent to which climate change is man-made. I don't know the extent to which AI will evolve, and I don't think anyone does.
Right.
Again, and we've got this like fascination right now in terms of like AI, but it's other technologies as well, right?
Yeah.
If you got rid of physical currency completely, what impact will that have on societies? What if one thing that I think the blockchain world have always argued for is decentralized finance completely, right? What happens when someone just like realizes that they don't have to rob a diamond vault in Hatton Garden? What if they just realize they can just like rob someone for their Bitcoin, and it's pretty much it's untraceable?
Right.
But I say one more thing. In terms of what you're saying about societies and evolving, I think that the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans had the same belief that you had in terms of, societies do break. Like, I look at ancient Egypt, right?
Yeah.
Look at the pyramids.
Yep.
Why did they stop building them?
Yes.
Right? There's something must have happened, and I think that it's very possible that there's a lost technology, or there must have been like an event, I would assume.
I agree.
That just done. And AI could be that thing.
Well,
I'm saying we don't know, but it could be.
Exactly. But I do remember, like, in school we were learning about Egypt and just all these theories about how they managed to bring all those huge pieces of stone and stack them. Just humans, right? I mean, there's so many different ideas. Maybe they did have some tech back then no one knows about.
I think they again, I'm not an expert on that, but they must have. Right? I think that, I don't know what each one of them, they must have weighed like a few ton each, every one of those bricks, and I think they had about 200,000, 250,000 bricks per pyramid.
Right.
So somehow they've moved them. But I think the focus, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm saying the focus is, why did they stop building them? Right. Why is the pyramids like around the world? Why is it that all of a sudden Rome fell? Fine, okay, we know why Rome fell, but I'm saying that there's a possibility that there have been ancient civilizations that had technologies that somehow forgotten about, or lost rather. And I think what's interesting is that one thing we'd never really think about as humans is life is very quick, right? And if we think, if the universe is, I'm going somewhere with this, if the universe is 13.8 billion years old, right?
Yeah.
Humans have been on this planet for what, relatively speaking, like less than a second.
Yeah.
In terms of like human history, we're babies. So I think it would be naive of us to think we have all the answers. And I think with things like the jobs market, with the way in which we live, to think that it's just a given, be like, well, not would be, is incredibly naive of us.
Yeah.
I think the world's in a very precarious situation. I think that we have to be practical about it, and I think we have to just try and like find it to each other. And I think that applied morality when developing these technologies and regulation, right, is unfortunately regulation is almost like there's no point after the horse has bolted, and this AI horse is very well bolted. But I think we just have to try and create opportunity for the individual.
What we've just established through all of this conversation that we had is that where AI will be, how it will impact the future, we don't know. We can only guess at this point. And I'd love to have another podcast 6 months down the road, 8 months, see where it stands. But the way I see this conversation, I had this thought in my head. It's basically everyone needs to rethink what it means to be human, honestly. I mean, it's really reflecting. Everyone's gone through generations of following a path, like following the herd, and it's actually our opportunity to rethink what is being human. What do we want to do with ourselves? I mean, I guess that's why a lot of people are going through inner reflection and trying to find purpose, and everyone's going through this journey of feeling lost and trying to figure it out, I suppose. And maybe that's definitely an area I definitely see a lot more people trying to coach and help other people through their lives and through their invisible fears and trying to figure out life, but anyways, now I think that's where I can end it. It's like reinventing ourselves and learning how to be human again. Hey, so that concludes this episode of the Startup Voyage podcast. I would like to thank all of you for listening to this episode, and I'd really appreciate it if you leave any type of comments that you'd like to share, because it helps to feedback on how I deliver these podcasts, and I definitely want to improve it to continue to add more value to the audience. Now, you can follow us on many of the popular podcast channels: Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Equally, I'm going to be uploading all of these episodes onto YouTube. So it's more than just audio, it's video. You can see everyone's faces. Look, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. And I'm always open to new ideas or looking for new guests. So if you know anyone in the space of Web3 that is an influencer or leader or someone who's really trying to shape what Web3 will be in the future, I'd love to hear from them. All right. So yeah, just comment below. You can DM me. I have all my information in the details underneath this podcast episode. So yeah, thank you for joining me today, and have a great one. See you in the next episode.